This is the last batch of cheese that just came out of the freeze dryer. So we have the cottage cheese over here that came out just fine. We'll rehydrate that in just a moment. And this is the cream cheese. And we're going to rehydrate this a couple different ways. There is a cautionary tale when it comes to cream cheese. And this is my pepper jack cheese. They're in little individual squares, and they are just really delicate. You can see if I would, well, for one, they're probably too big to put in a jar, and to put in the Mylar bag, they'll just break up. So eventually, this is just going to be like a shredded cheese. I can still use it in recipes and such, but it's just going to crumble and break into smaller pieces, and that is just fine. But what I really want to take a look at is this block cheese. And the first thing I've noticed is there's a lot of oil around this block cheese. The moisture's trying to get out and can get out, but as this cheese heats up, it just started sweating oil everywhere. And so that's one of the problems. All the moisture just can't get out, but we're going to take a look inside this block cheese to see what happened. We're going to start with the smallest piece first. And the inside is absolutely dry. This is the smallest piece, and this actually freeze dried rather well. No problem with that. It was thin enough to do it. Let's take a look at the bigger piece here. Bigger piece, also freeze dried well. It's a solid mass. Nothing soft or cold inside, so that piece went pretty good. This is a piece that's about 3/4 of an inch thick. And this piece has some interesting texture in the center. So what we're going to do, we're going to take my infrared and take a picture of this here. And we'll discuss that in just a moment. And this is the one that's like 1.5 inches. This is the big daddy of them all. And I just hope this thing doesn't shatter as it goes all over the place here. And we're going to take a picture of that also with the infrared. These are the two infrared pictures of the cheeses. This piece right here is a piece that was about 3/4 inches thick, and this one was about 1.5 inches. And you can see by the scale of 108 and 107 that the centers of the cheeses were quite warm, and they were actually dry. No cold sections, no sign of water in the cheese at all. So the freeze dryer was able to dry the cheese out very well, despite how thick the cheese were. But rehydrating it, that's a whole nother issue. So you can freeze dry the cheese, but in block form, it really is impractical. Now, although most of this cheese is fairly dry, even in the center, it feels dry. Rehydrating this is going to be really interesting. So what we're going to do, we're going to take these two pieces and we're going to submerge them in water and see how long it takes. And I fear what's going to happen is as we try to reconstitute this piece of block cheese, the outer piece is going to basically melt away before the water can even reach the inner piece. And I think it's just going to turn out to be watered down cheese soup before this can get or become viable cheese again. And I think that's going to be the biggest problem with block cheese. It may freeze dry like this did, but it's going to be almost impossible to rehydrate this in its current form without probably crushing this up into a powder or into smaller pieces to rehydrate it. And I don't think it's going to be practical. And then this piece right here, this piece of American cheese, most people are going to tell me I probably should have put it on a silicone mat, but this thing just kind of, it just shattered. And American cheese, you know, these little American pieces of cheese, it is cheese, but it has a lot of oil in it, and it just kind of went to nothing. These are the two block cheeses that were left overnight in water, and as you can see, the outside is pretty much well dissolved and the inside is still dry as a bone. The moisture was only able to penetrate less than 1/8 of an inch. So trying to do block cheese is just a bad idea. It's not practical. Stick with shredded cheese if you really want to do cheese at all. I took my block cheese and I put it through the blender, and this is what I have. And it's not as powdery as I was hoping for. It's kind of mealy, but it also kind of packs together, and to the touch it feels very, very oily. And if you remember, when I took this off the pan, there was a lot of oil on the pan that came from the cheese. So I'm not sure exactly what the difference between block cheese and shredded cheese is going to be and what happens in the process of manufacturing, but this is not a good product, having blocked freeze-dried cheese. My guess, this would probably go rancid faster than regular shredded cheese because it just feels oily. So I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to convince yourself that doing blocked cheese is probably not a good idea. I have the cottage cheese right here that we're going to rehydrate. And the best method I have for rehydrating cottage cheese is to use ice water. I'd shy away from room temperature and hot water because if the cheese gets too warm, it's going to melt and you end up with cheese soup. So you can see the ice cubes in here. So we're just going to add a little bit of ice water, and the ice water will help control the amount of hydration, and it will keep the cottage cheese in its original form without melting into the liquid that we're trying to rehydrate it in. I think in making lasagna, I'm sure if I get this wrong, someone's going to correct me, but I think cottage cheese is a substitute for ricotta in lasagna. If you don't want to afford ricotta cheese, you use cottage cheese, I believe. Ricotta, the curds in the ricotta is finer, and cottage cheese is a little bit more lumpy. Okay, so there we go. This is probably a little bit more thicker. We can probably put a little bit more water in here. But if you use ice water with cottage cheese, it will keep its form a little bit better. Just like so. And it tastes less like cottage cheese. So that is cottage cheese that's reconstituted. Use ice water instead of tepid or warm water when you want to do cottage cheese. This is our cream cheese, and cream cheese is exactly opposite from cottage cheese. And I found out about using cold water with cream cheese when I went camping one time, but we'll get into that later. So we got a sample of cream cheese right here, and we got some warmer water right here. So we're going to go ahead and do the cream cheese, and it's pretty simple stuff. You just want to put the warm water in with the cream cheese until it comes back into a paste. It's a pretty much no-brainer. Except this time I think I probably put too much water in it. we have cream cheese. Tastes just like I got it out of the package just today. Now, so let me tell you a story about cream cheese and camping. So we went camping up in the mountains, and we're going to have bagels in the morning. So I got up in the morning, and those who've been up in the mountains, it's a little bit cooler in the morning. So I started making cream cheese, and something happened to my cream cheese. The cheese broke, and I ended up with this watery substance in the cheese, and I couldn't understand what it was until later on. And that's because it's so cold, and I used water, out of the camp faucet. There was this icy cold, and the cold water actually broke the cream cheese as I was mixing it. So I'm going to see if I can break the cream cheese here using this ice water and get the same results that I did when I went camping. I'm going to have to use a different container for this. And I put a little bit too much water with that one too. Okay. Now I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little bit of water there. So if you use cold water when trying to make cream cheese and you mix it, I'm not sure if the term is proper by breaking it, but you can actually make it to where the water will separate itself permanently from the cream cheese, and it just kind of goes south. And the cream cheese kind of becomes this kind of a gritty, it kind of has a gritty texture to it. It's no longer smooth. It's almost like it's coagulated, and it tastes terrible. And so just remember, especially if you're going to go camping, don't reconstitute cream cheese with cold water. If you go camping, warm some water up on the campfire or something. But if you use warmer water with cream cheese, it'll come out just fine. If you use cold water, it'll break the cream cheese, and your cream cheese becomes lumpy and almost like it's sandy, so to speak. So that's my tip on the cream cheese. This concludes my video on cheeses. I did 18 pounds worth of shredded cheese, and I think it was 4 containers of cream cheese and 2 containers of cottage cheese and a couple of containers of sliced cheese. So all this is going to go into my food storage. If some of this looks kind of unusual to you, that is because I do all my cheese vacuum packed. So it takes up a lot less room. It makes a nice little kind of a brick here. This right here is sharp cheddar cheese. And if you don't know anything about vacuum packing, or if you haven't done vacuum packing, it's a really nice way of doing it. And even though I vacuum pack it, I still have an oxygen absorber inside as an insurance policy. But this will keep the cheese more shelf stable for a longer period of time. If you're interested in some of the procedures that I performed while doing this video, such as vacuum packing, those links will be at the end of this video. So if you haven't done cheese, and you really need to do cheese, it's a great way of getting your protein, and it's a good ingredient to use in the future. So thank you for your time. Please subscribe, and as always, go forth and freeze dry the world, and I will send you another video soon.